Hello there, and thanks for watching the next video of Palo Alto Video Training Service. In this video, we're going to talk about user identification, Active Directory integration a bit more. In previous video, if you remember, we talked about LDAP authentication and integration, created LDAP profile. In this video, we're going to talk about specifically user identification, how basically we make sure that the users will be identified on Palo Alto logs, and how we can create roles and stuff based on the usernames rather than IP addresses and stuff. So let's get started. So the first thing that I just want to show you is basically what I have done after the previous video. If you remember, I've had my Windows 2012 server, I've had my Palo Alto Firewall, and I have installed a Windows XP machine, which is part of the domain, the local domain that we have. So if I show you the network connectivity on Windows XP machine, you can see it's on the inside LAN. It's on the same LAN as Windows 2012. Same network, and I have basically joined these to the domain, and this is basically the IP address and the default gateway, same default gateway as the VMware domain controller, but the DNS server for this machine obviously has to be the domain IP address, the domain controller IP address, so I can resolve the domain and things like that. So if I go back to the diagram, what I have done, I have on this segment here, I have installed a Windows XP machine, and that's part of this domain as well, just to be able to do some tests. We just log into our firewall to start specific user identification configuration for Active Directory. First thing we got to do is to make sure that we have the requirements on our Active Directory before we start obviously setting up the firewall. And there are some basic requirements, like you need to have a username and with the right privileges and things like that on your Active Directory. So if you go to Palo Alto website, there is a pretty straightforward guide about how to configure agentless user ID that you could go in there and just review. But to let you know, there are two things that you need to do on your domain. So this is our Windows server. I just log into the domain controller. One thing is, as I told you before, I've created an user, so you obviously need to have a user on your Active Directory, and that user needs to be a member of distributed com. It doesn't have to be a domain admin. Well, I have just added for myself because I was doing some tests, but all you need is distributed com users. So that's basically your user has to be part of that. And the other thing that you need to know is if you run MMC and add WMI control snapping over there, if you see the WMI, and if you go to the security tab, properties and security tab, see the CIM version 2, click on security, and you can see I have added pan user enable account and remote enable in there as well. So these privileges are necessary for your user to be able to be used as user identification user under Palo Alto Firewall. So these 2 steps you have to do on your domain controller. Again, if you look for this article, it's pretty straightforward. So you have to do this on your Palo Alto, on your Windows domain controller server. So the steps that you have to do on Palo Alto Firewall, you have to go to device tab and user identification. So we talked about group mapping. So we tested our LLab server here, so we could check the attributes on the server and things like that. So the server connectivity we tested here. Things that you have to do here is on user identification tab, user mapping, select the edit on the top right. So you see we have the WMI authentication in there. So we just type our and passport. And we have NTLM in there as well. We could enable NTLM as well. Okay, so enable WMI and NTLM. Click on OK. So we've done this, and now we need to add our Active Directory server to be monitored to make sure it's got the connectivity and enabled. So again, just give it a name and type the IP address of our domain controller, which is 192.168.1.2. So once we've done all these, status obviously should come as okay. So we just commit the changes that we've done. And we can check the status to make sure that we got the connectivity. You see that status shows us connected, which is good. The other thing we need to do is go to network zones and make sure that on the inside zone we have enabled user identification as well. So that needs to be checked to be able to do the user identification. I'm going to create a couple of rules and stuff to basically provide initial connectivity on your Palo Alto Firewall, so we can do some tests. We will be talking in more details about policies and routes and things like that later on. But for now, we just create a couple of things to just provide appropriate access. First thing we're going to do is we make sure that we have a static route on Palo Alto Firewall to the default gateway. So if we go to our virtual routes, my route, so remember that we have added the directly connected interfaces. We have to create a static route. We just call it default route, or whatever we want to call it. IP address 000/0, which basically means everything. Interface, outside interface, and the IP address of the gateway is 137.1. So that's basically our PC. If you remember, we're just going back to diagram. So this is basically our default gateway, 137.1. Click on OK. So we got the routing enabled. Now we have to create a policy to just make sure that we are allowing people to access to do some tests, identification tests. So I'm just going to create the rule which is going to allow everything for now. Not a really good thing in practice, but this is what we're going to do in lab just to do some tests for now. And log it, and that's it. So we have a rule which says from inside to outside for now. Allow anything and log it. Next thing we need to do is basically going back to the diagram. If this computer or the PC that we have here needs to access internet, obviously there has to be some level of translation on the firewall to get access to the internet. So that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to create a NAT rule. We will be talking about this later on, but this is just to do some tests. Call it NAT or global NAT, and source is inside, our destination is outside, and it will be translated to interface, and interface 1/2 IP address of the interface is 192.168.127. So that's just to do the translation. So these couple of things that I've done is just to provide basic connectivity and making sure that we have internet access on the PC. So we just copy the changes that we've done. So once it's applied, we should have network connectivity or internet connectivity on our both server and client. So we just give it a test. And sure enough, we don't have internet access for whatever reasons. We're gonna do some more troubleshooting. Let's just test it on our Windows XP. Same thing here. Okay, so one thing that I forgot to mention is we need to make sure that going back to the diagram again, we have our virtual interface, NAT interface here, and we have our physical interface here. So that interface obviously needs to be shared. Otherwise, there won't be any internet access. So this interface needs to be shared and accessible from this interface. So we need to do, on our PC, we need to share that interface. I'm just going to do it now. If that's my wireless. Okay, so going to share tab and select that VMnet 8, which is our NAT interface. Okay, just making sure the IP address is right. So we've shared this interface. We just test the connectivity again, and sure enough, we have internet access now. Tested on our PC on workstation, which is a member of the domain, and you can see that we have internet connectivity on this PC, on this Windows XP workstation. So now we're going back to our Palo Alto Firewall. Based on what we've done in the user identification, we should see usernames on the logs. We go to Monitor tab, and sure enough, we can see on workstation, when I connected from workstation, it can recognize the username that I have and where it's connecting to, things like that. So that's basically the LDAP or Active Directory user identification, which makes next generation firewalls to be able to do things like user filtering and user identification and creating nice reports and things like that based on the username. So those couple of steps that you have to do the user identification with Active Directory. I hope you've enjoyed this. I'll be with you on the next video. Thanks all.